Alright, now we're going to look at texture and typography and how it works in web design and what you can use and some good practices for both. We're going to explore texture and typography in web design. That's the main goal for this lesson. And while we're going through this lesson, think about how does the style of text convey an emotion. That means like the color maybe, or the size, also the type of font you're using. Texture often creates the illusion of depth or three dimensions on a flat surface. You can use lines, shadows, or color to highlight different parts. And let's look at these two websites. Alright, you can see here at the top how this graphic brings texture to the website. And over here on the side you can see the texture that's brought with just the different uses of graphics. If we continue to look through the website, this is a good example of texture just by the use of these graphics, the shadows, the water paint type style or watercolor where it's faded. And again, he has the same graphic, but it brings some texture to this usually, a flat computer screen. Let's look at the other website. So you notice this background stays the same and it's just an image, while the information is on top. But you can see the jagged lines here that helps bring texture to the website. And then if we look down here, we have this kind of like chalkboardy surface that helps bring texture to the website. Using lines for textures. With this, you can consider lines that are already in nature, like the veins in a leaf. Also, you can look at the detailed lines of hand-drawn images, and that was kind of what we saw on the first website I showed you with those images. Grains of wood also provide texture. Fur or hair on an animal, you could maybe have that as a background. But mainly you want to give the illusion that the object is not flat. And you can use shadows to create texture. If you look over here, we have this font where you have the shadow to create texture to help bring that word out off the screen. And when you create navigation buttons, you can see this one here has a shadow effect. So there's a couple ways to add texture into your website. And then using texture as a background. It can add visual appeal to a website, but if you use it incorrectly, it can be distracting. So let's look at these couple websites and see how they use texture. Alright, in this you can see that they're using texture here with this graphic background, and notice the shadow that they use on the word. It's hard to get it to come back, but that's a good use of texture to bring the word out. See how they get that out? Let's check the other websites. This is actually a website of some websites that are well designed, but if we scroll down, if you look at this one, you can see the texture as the background. I like this one a lot because it has the corkboard. So let's see if I have the demo. So if you look at this, you can see the corkboard effect that gives texture to this web page. And then of course all the information will go in here in the white space. But it adds texture to your web page. And let's look at Chipotle. This graphic kind of adds texture to it. And then right down here you can see they have this where it looks like the screen. So let's click on it, and you see how it rolls up. But then this background is such that it provides texture for it. And then here's another example of how Chipotle does a good job of adding texture to their website. We can see that they just have this image of a 3-ring binder to help bring texture in, and they also have this piece of paper here to help bring the texture into their website. Alright, let's talk about typography. So you just gotta remember, these are brief overviews of each of these topics. So you got a brief glimpse of texture in a couple websites that use it. Chipotle was one of the stronger sites that had good examples of texture. So let's talk about typography here. For typography, there's things you need to remember. The style or the font that you're going to use, so you need to think about that. What kind of typography or font, or how are you going to emphasize something on your web page? Is it going to be a larger size, or is it going to be a different color? So think about the different uses of typography we can. So let's go look at typography a little closer. Alright, style, we're talking about font. And there's two types of font that we're going to cover. We have the serif font, and then we have the sans serif font. There's two key differences between the two. The serif font has small strokes at the end of the letters. So if you look at these little strokes you can see at the end of the letters, like on the L, and if you look down here, so if you look at this L, see how there's little strokes there? If you look at this L, there isn't any little strokes. Okay? Serif font is better with printed material. And an example is Times New Roman. Now, in the computer or the electronic material, sans serif font's better. And an example is Arial. It's just easier to read on a computer screen. So, and some examples, if you see this T right here, you can see the little strokes at the end of the letters. So same with this U. See how this U compared to this U? See the little strokes here at the top of the U, and this one doesn't have any strokes down here. So that's the main difference between serif font and sans serif. So you want to try to keep on a web page your font to mainly the sans serif types of font. Also, when you're choosing your font, you want to be careful of the types of font that you use. So the font like this historical, the script font, can be difficult to read in longer portions of text. It may be good for a header or use of a title or something, but if you have a lot of information that you're trying to get across, it's not a good idea to use a font that's hard to read. And then also, these are fun kind of fonts to use, but they're not very useful on a web page. Maybe just for decoration here and there, but maybe you could have like a little challenge. If you can guess this font or this word, then you get a free prize or something. But it's not something that you want to use every day on your website. Now, there's different ways to emphasize your font. You can use bold, italic, you can change the color, and you can change the size. Some things you want to be careful with is you want to use it sparingly, and you want to be consistent in your use. So if you have all of your headings in bold, that's fine, but you don't want every single word in bold, otherwise it loses its emphasis. So just make sure you're consistent with what you're doing with your font. So if you want all your headings bold and red, then make sure you stick with that throughout your website. And with the size, we'll get into that a little more, but make sure your body text is a different size than your heading text. And also, importantly, it's important to avoid underlining. Why? Because when you see an underlined word in a web page, you think it's a link. Alright, let's look at size. The size of your font is pretty important, especially when you're designing a web page. Size is measured by points, and a point is 1/72 of an inch. And for web pages, the main body is between 14 points and 12 to 14 points, and 10 points or lower, so a 10 pixel font or lower is hard to read. 16 you mainly use for headings. Okay, and again, you want to be consistent with the size. So you want to reserve your larger font sizes for your headings and your smaller font sizes for your body text. Now, sometimes at the bottom of the page you have the copyright or they have information. That would be a good use of the smaller font sizes when it's not important information, but you need to have it on the web page and you don't want it to take up too much real estate on your screen. So you can use smaller font for stuff that goes on along the bottom of the page. Okay, remember, it's important to understand that the type of typography used sends a certain message. Okay, some styles can communicate an emotion or feeling. If you use a decorative font, it can be like a historic web page or an elegant web page, maybe say a wedding photographer. If you use all capitals, that might indicate anger or shouting. Okay, so let's say we started a business and you were going to talk about emerging technologies. Would you want your font to be an old style font? Okay, if this is what the reader came across, or the person surfing the web saw this emerging technologies, they would think, why are they using an old font for something that's new? Okay, so you want to choose a different font. And quiet nap time, it's all caps, right? So a lot of times that looks like somebody's yelling. So why would you use all caps? Maybe you'd use something that's more subdued and like one of those fonts that I showed you on that Be Quiet PowerPoint. So make sure the font you choose and the style you're using conveys the meaning of your website. Alright, so you're finishing up your design analysis project, okay, and you want to go back to your website and you want to look at how they use texture, if they do or don't. If they don't, you could maybe you could talk about why it's not needed or how they could add it. Then also look at their typography and see how their font changes between their headings and then the body text, and see what kind of different styles they use for, like I said, headings and body text, and just how it's used throughout their website. And you can also look at this best of 2010. There's some good websites in here. So if we look at this website, you can see that they see these lines that they have in the book and this kind of chalk that kind of provides textures. And then when you go over there, you can click on it and it opens the page. And notice how they use the shadow over here to create the effect of the book turning. And notice the lines they're using in here. Okay, and notice the difference between this title up here and notice down here. Now they're using two different kinds of font. This one doesn't have the little strokes at the end, and this one does. So you can just page through this book, so it's a pretty cool and interactive site. So I invite you to come look at these sites and just cruise through and look at, let's see what this one looks like. So you can see how they use light and the graphics here. To bring your attention to the middle of this page, notice it goes from darker to lighter to focus your attention to this center of the page. So again, cruise through this, and it's the way you learn about this and see it in action is to look at different sites throughout the web and that's why your project is to choose one site and evaluate it on the criteria that we've already talked about. Alright, so think about how the use of texture in typography and how you can apply it in web design.